Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take fascinating sources, stacks of them sometimes, and, well, we pull out the absolute must-know nuggets for you.
That's the plan.
And today, we're plunging into something so basic, so fundamental, we probably barely ever stop to think about it. Childhood.
Right. We all think we know what it is.
Exactly. We've got this
Duh.
deeply ingrained idea. But our mission today, it's to uncover something maybe a bit surprising. Is childhood this universal, natural stage, same everywhere, always?
It is something fundamentally shaped by society itself.
That's the question.
Yeah, it's a concept that it can feel a bit counterintuitive at first, but this deep dive, I think it'll absolutely challenge those common assumptions we all hold.
How so?
Well, we're going to explore how the whole idea of a child, with all the expectations, the protections, the roles we assign, how that's changed quite dramatically across history, different cultures.
And even within our own society today.
Yeah, absolutely. Even now, we'll be pulling insights from some, frankly, really eye-opening sociological perspectives that sort of reframe the whole thing.
So by the end of this deep dive, the idea is you'll have a shortcut to understanding this complex and fascinating topic, moving beyond the simple stuff.
Yeah, beyond just kids are kids.
Right, to really grasp the social complexities. Get ready, because you might see the children in your life, maybe even your own past, in a completely new light after this.
Hopefully.
Okay, let's dive straight in then. What does it actually mean to say childhood is a social construct? That phrase gets thrown around.
It does.
For a lot of us, it sounds almost like denying biology, doesn't it? We know there are biological stages, infancy, puberty.
Of course. Biology is real.
But how does understanding childhood specifically, with its legal status, social standing, the protection, the expectations, how does that reframe this whole nature versus nurture thing? How much is society creating it?
Well, that's the absolute key distinction, isn't it? Childhood, as we typically think of it, it isn't just a biological fact. It's a status. It's a set of expectations, a whole stage of life that society has actively defined. Through cultural norms, economic pressures, legal frameworks. These things profoundly shape what it means to be a child in a particular time and place. It's not some universal, unchanging truth.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating here is the work of Philippe Arias. Back in 1962, he published this groundbreaking argument. He looked at medieval Europe, pre-industrial society.
Right.
And he basically argued, quite boldly, that a distinct social phase of childhood, it largely didn't exist then.
Didn't exist.
Everything.
What does that mean? Like no kids?
No, of course there were young people. But once they were past basic physical dependency, say, around age 7 or so, they were essentially seen and treated as miniature adults.
Miniature adults. Wow. That feels almost impossible to grasp from where we stand now.
It does.
What kind of evidence did Arias actually find? How could he tell they were seen that way?
Well, the evidence is surprisingly compelling once you start looking. You find that medieval children, they participated in adult work, adult leisure activities.
So working alongside adults, playing the same games.
Yes, exactly. And facing similar punishments, too, for doing wrong. There wasn't this clear separation we have now. You can even see it quite vividly sometimes in historical paintings.
So?
Children are often shown wearing essentially smaller versions of adult clothing. Their features look more adult-like in the art. They're depicted engaging in adult activities alongside the grown-ups.
Huh. So no special clothes, no special protection, no long period of innocence like we imagine.
Largely no. That idea that children need this special protected bubble, this long period of dependency that came much later.
Okay, so if that's what it was like,
Yeah,
then here's where it gets really interesting, as you said. A massive shift clearly happened.
a huge shift.
So what drove it? What were the key reasons for the emergence of what we call modern childhood, particularly in the West, starting around, the 17th century, and then really picking up speed in the 19th and 20th? It sounds like a fundamental reshaping of how society works.
Oh, absolutely. It was a profound societal transformation, and it was driven by several crucial factors working together. First, industrialization. That played a massive role.
How did factories change childhood?
Well, as factories grew, the need changed. Suddenly, there was this increasing demand for a more disciplined workforce, a more literate workforce.
Right, people who could follow complex instructions, maybe read manuals.
Precisely. And that started pushing children out of the factories and workshops, places they might have worked before alongside adults, and increasingly pushed them towards schools.
Ah, okay. Which leads straight to the next factor, I guess.
Exactly. Legislation, laws started getting passed, like the Factory Acts in Britain. Now, these weren't just about protecting children from really brutal exploitation, though that was part of it.
Important part.
Crucial. But they also served to actively remove children from the adult world of labor. And alongside those laws, you had things like the Education Acts, making schooling compulsory.
Right, so kids had to go to school.
They had to. And that fundamentally reshaped their daily lives. It effectively segregated them from the adult world for large parts of the day, the year, and that fostered a distinct peer culture among children themselves, being grouped by age, learning together.
Away from adults. Okay, that makes sense.
What else? Then you have medical advances. This is huge. Infant mortality rates started to drop significantly.
So more babies survived.
Far more. And that meant parents were much more likely to see their children actually grow up, survive into adulthood. You can imagine how that changes things.
You invest more emotionally, financially.
Exactly. Parents started investing more emotionally, financially, too, in fewer children, rather than having many children with the expectation some wouldn't make it. Parental attitudes shifted dramatically.
And related to that.
Related to that, you saw the growth of child psychology and pediatrics. Suddenly, you have new scientific theories emerging about how children develop, what their specific needs are.
Like Piaget, Freud,
Yeah.
those kinds of ideas.
Those kinds of ideas, yes, starting to filter down. These theories promoted a view of children as, well, as fragile, as unique beings with distinct developmental stages and needs. This really cemented the idea that they required special protection, a specific environment school, the nursery designed just for them.
Wow. So it's this complex web of industrial change, laws, medicine, science, all weaving together to create this thing we now call childhood.
That's a good way to put it, a complex web.
Okay, so that's the historical journey. It makes me wonder then, if childhood has changed that much over time, what does our modern Western concept of childhood, let's say here in the UK, what does it actually look like right now? What are its defining features that we just, take for granted?
Right. Well, in contemporary Western societies like the UK, our sort of blueprint for childhood has several key features. One is a very strong sense of separateness.
Separateness.
Yeah, children are viewed as fundamentally different from adults, physically, psychologically. They're seen as needing their own spaces, their own activities, kept apart from the adult world in many ways.
Okay, and that leads to?
That leads directly to an emphasis on protection. Children are seen as inherently vulnerable, almost fragile, and definitely in need of safeguarding from the complexities and dangers of the adult world.
Makes sense. What else defines it?
Then there's dependency. Children are economically dependent on adults for a really significant period, much longer than historically.
Right, we support them financially for years, decades sometimes.
Exactly. Which means childhood itself has become a period of much longer duration. More years spent in education, more years dependent compared to the past.
And there's an emotional aspect too, right?
Definitely. We often idealize children as embodying innocence, pure, uncorrupted by adult worries or knowledge. That's a very powerful cultural image.
It is.
And crucially, perhaps defining the modern era more than anything, is the concept of rights. Children have specific rights, legally recognized, like those laid out in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the UNCRC.
What kind of rights are we talking about?
Broadly, they cover rights to protection, obviously, but also rights to provision, like healthcare, education, and importantly, rights to participation, having a say in matters that affect them.
Okay, so separateness, protection, dependency, longer duration, innocence, and rights. That's the package deal, more or less.
So that's a pretty good summary of the modern Western blueprint, yes.
Right. But if childhood really is this social construct built by society, that implies it shouldn't look the same everywhere, right?
Exactly.
There must be huge differences across cultures. So what kinds of variations do we see outside this Western model we've just laid out? And what do those differences tell us about our own assumptions?
Oh, this is where it gets really fascinating, because the idea of childhood as a social construct gets strong support when you look globally.
How so?
Well, in many non-Western societies, you could look at certain indigenous communities, perhaps some developing countries. You find far less of that rigid separation between children and adults that we just talked about.
Less separation,
Yep. Meaning children might participate in adult work, take on significant responsibilities from a much younger age. There's often way less emphasis on that Western ideal of protected innocence or the need for such a long period of dependency.
So our way isn't the only way.
Not at all. It really challenges the notion that our specific model of childhood is somehow the natural or correct one. It's just one way societies have organized the early years of life.
And the research really backs this up with concrete examples, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
remember reading about
Right.
about it.
Ruth Benedict, yeah.
Yeah.
Back in 1934, she observed that children in many non-industrial societies were often given much more responsibility much earlier on. And crucially, their behavior wasn't as strictly controlled or micromanaged as we might see in the West.
So not about being permissive, but just a different view of their capabilities.
Exactly, a different set of expectations. Then you have Punch, much later, in 2001, studying rural Bolivia. Found children as young as 5 were expected to take on significant work responsibilities, not just chores, but real work within the home and community.
5 years old. Wow.
Yeah. And Firth, studying the Tocopia people in 1963, he noted something really interesting. Strict obedience to adult authority, which we often take as a given for kids, it wasn't even an expected norm for children there.
So these aren't just tiny tweaks. They're fundamentally different ways of experiencing what it means to grow up.
Fundamentally different, yes.
Okay, let's bring it home now.
Okay.
Because even within a Western context, like here in the UK, the experience of childhood isn't static either, is it?
Yeah.
It continues to change, evolve, pretty rapidly sometimes.
Definitely not static, it's always shifting.
So what are some of these ongoing shifts we're seeing right now, and what are the implications?
Well, one major trend sociologists talk about is the rise of the child-centered society.
Child-centered, meaning?
Meaning, children are increasingly seen as the focal point of the family unit. Parents are investing, truly enormous amounts of emotional energy and financial resources into their children's well-being, their development, their future, arguably more than any generation before.
Okay, that sounds positive on the surface. More focus on kids.
Yeah. It does, but it's almost ironic because this very child-centered approach, this intense focus, is actually what leads some sociologists to argue that we might inadvertently be creating, well, a toxic childhood.
Right, that term. Sue Palmer, I think. Toxic childhood. That sounds like a paradox. We're focusing more on kids, investing more.
Yeah.
How can that be toxic?
Well, Palmer's argument is that despite our best intentions, several modern trends are actually quite detrimental. She points to things like the massive decline in outdoor play,
Replaced by screens.
replaced by an exponential rise in screen time, exactly. Then there's the increasing pressure in education, constant testing,
Yeah.
assessment,
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
and also this pervasive, incredibly sophisticated, aggressive marketing machine that targets children directly, shaping their desires, their value.
From a very young age.
From a very young age. And Palmer argues all these factors combine to create this toxic environment, potentially harming children's physical health, their emotional well-being, even their intellectual development, because they're missing out on, fundamental childhood experiences like unstructured play, exploration.
That's a pretty powerful, if concerning, argument.
Yeah.
And kind of building on that worry, maybe, there was Neil Postman back in '94.
Mm-hmm.
He had another really provocative idea, the disappearance of childhood.
Ah, yes, Postman. Controversial stuff.
He suggested the lines between childhood and adulthood are blurring, right?
Yeah.
Largely because of media, like TV back then, now the internet. Can you unpack his theory a bit? What did he think was happening?
Postman's core idea was about information. He argued that print media, books, required literacy. It created a natural barrier, keeping certain adult knowledge away from children until they were deemed ready.
Okay.
But electronic media, first television, now obviously the internet, social media, they don't have that barrier. Images, sounds,
Right.
They're instantly accessible regardless of literacy or perhaps emotional maturity.
So kids are seeing and hearing things they wouldn't have before.
Exactly. He argued this exposes children to complex, often disturbing adult themes, sex, death, violence, suffering at a very young age, often without context or the filters that parents or communities might have once provided.
And the result, for Postman, was...
He believed this constant exposure was eroding that traditional distinction, the line between the innocent child who doesn't know certain things and the knowledgeable adult who does.
Yeah.
That line was dissolving. He felt childhood, as that distinct protected stage, was effectively shortening, maybe even disappearing altogether.
Disappearing. That's a strong claim. Is it really disappearing? Has childhood vanished? Or is that maybe overstating it? Has it just changed?
Well, yeah, critics like Jenks, writing in 2005, suggested Postman probably did overstate his case a bit. While boundaries are definitely blurring, no question.
They seem to be.
Childhood itself isn't just vanishing into thin air. It's more that it's constantly changing, evolving, adapting to new social conditions, new technologies.
Okay, so not disappearing, but transforming.
Exactly. And this leads us nicely into what's sometimes called the new sociology of childhood. This is a more recent approach.
What's new about it?
What's new is the perspective. It really pushes back against viewing children as just passive recipients of adult socialization, like empty vessels waiting to be filled or
Yeah.
little sponges just soaking things up.
Okay, so how does it see them?
It sees children as active agents, as social actors in their own right, people who shape their own lives, who influence their families, who contribute to society in meaningful ways, even from a young age. It strongly advocates for actually listening to children's voices, understanding their perspectives, acknowledging their agency.
Right. And that ties back into the idea of children's rights we mentioned earlier, doesn't it?
It does, very much so.
That UN convention, the UNCRC. Its influence seems to be about increasing that legal recognition, not just of children's needs for protection and provision, but also their right to participate, to have a voice.
Absolutely. That participation element is key in this newer thinking. However,
Right.
there's always a however, isn't there?
Usually is.
Despite these advancements in rights and this focus on agency, Diana Gittins, back in 1998, introduced a concept that gives us pause. Age patriarchy.
Age patriarchy. Like patriarchy based on gender, but based on age.
Precisely. Gittins offers this stark reminder that despite all the talk of rights and empowerment, children are still, in fundamental ways, subject to adult domination and oppression.
How so? In what ways?
She points out how adults exert profound control over almost every aspect of children's lives. Think about strict bedtimes, school schedules, structured activities.
Wow, very controlled.
There's space where they're allowed to go or they're not allowed to go, being confined to home or school. Their bodies, what they wear, what they eat, whether they can get a piercing or tattoo.
Adults make those decisions.
Adults make those decisions. And crucially, their access to resources. Children are almost entirely financially dependent. This power imbalance, Gittins argues, is a form of patriarchy based on age. There's even a perspective called child liberationism, stemming partly from these ideas.
What does that argue?
It basically argues for much greater autonomy for children, viewing their situation as similar to other oppressed groups fighting for liberation. It's quite radical.
Okay, so we have child-centeredness, toxic childhood, disappearance, active agents, rights, age patriarchy. It's complex.
It is. Lots of competing ideas.
So as we kind of pull back now and look at the big picture, it seems really critical to stress that even with all these trends and theories, the experience of childhood is definitely not uniform. Not all children experience it the same way.
Absolutely not.
So how do things like social class, ethnicity, gender, how do they intersect to create these really diverse childhoods, even within the same town or city? What does that look like on the ground?
Well, they create vastly different realities. Take social class, for instance. It profoundly shapes opportunity. Children from working class backgrounds might face greater poverty, obviously, but also fewer educational advantages, maybe fewer recreational opportunities.
Different expectations, maybe, different parenting styles sometimes.
Different parenting styles, yes, that's often observed, all of which impacts their development pathways compared to, say, middle-class children who might have more resources, different cultural capital.
Okay. And ethnicity.
Ethnicity plays a huge role, too. Children from some ethnic minority groups might experience different family structures, maybe more involvement from extended families, which can be a great support. They might face unique cultural expectations regarding responsibilities or respect for elders.
But also potentially negative experiences.
Sadly, yes. They may also have to contend with racism or discrimination, whether systemic or personal, which creates a very different, often more challenging reality.
And gender. Still a big factor.
Oh, undeniably. Gender still shapes childhood significantly. Girls and boys are often socialized differently from birth, aren't they? Different toys, different clothes, different expectations placed upon them.
Different rules sometimes.
Different rules, different levels of freedom or control. Think about curfews or expectations about chores. Access to certain activities or even future roles can still be heavily influenced by traditional gender norms, creating quite distinct paths through childhood for boys and girls.
So it's never just childhood. It's always childhood experienced as a working class girl or a middle class boy from a specific ethnic background.
Exactly. It's always specific, always situated.
What an incredible journey we've taken today, really. We've sort of unpacked this concept of childhood, haven't we? Moving all the way from that idea of medieval mini-adults.
That's so strange now.
To our really nuanced, complex, and, as we've seen, socially constructed modern understanding. We've touched on fascinating global variations, the ongoing shifts right here.
Yeah.
It all shows us childhood is anything but fixed or static.
It really does. And I think this raises a really important question for all of us, actually.
Which is,
How does understanding childhood as this dynamic, socially created thing,
Yeah.
how does that fundamentally change our perception of the younger generation and maybe our responsibilities towards them? How does it move us beyond just seeing them as, I don't know, smaller, incomplete versions of ourselves?
That's a great question to ponder, and maybe a final thought for you listening.
Hmm.
Now that you know childhood isn't this fixed biological stage set in stone, but actually a societal creation
Yeah.
constantly being remade, how might this new understanding challenge your own everyday assumptions about what it means to be a child
Yeah,
today?
you think about kids.
And maybe, how might it inform the way you interact with, or maybe even advocate for, children in your own life, your family, your community? We'd really encourage you to just
That's the
observe, look around at the different childhoods playing out all around you.
in the park, online, at school.
Exactly. And think about those invisible forces, the social, cultural, economic forces that are constantly shaping those experiences.